Jason Reed had long grown used to being invisible. It was part of the job. He pushed his mop bucket down the long corridors of Apex Corp's glass and chrome tower. The squeak of the wheels lost under the hum of server rooms and elevator chimes. Nobody noticed the janitor, especially not in a place like this, where billion-dollar deals passed through emails and handshakes, where young executives wore $1,000 watches and looked through people like Jason as if they weren't there. He liked it that way. It gave him space to think. It gave him peace. The night shift had become his sanctuary. Just him, the low hum of industrial vacuums, and the distant glow of LED lights against the midnight skyline. He moved from office to office with routine precision, a quiet rhythm that grounded him. After all, he had a daughter to care for, and Emma was the one reason he worked 2 jobs and skipped meals without complaint. She was 10, precocious, bright-eyed, too wise for her age. Every morning, before she caught the bus to school, he'd braid her hair with a shaky hand and a tired smile. She once asked, "Did you ever want to be something else?" Jason had looked at her, then with a softness only a father could wear. "I wanted to be someone who mattered. But right now, I want to be someone who's there for you." He wasn't always a janitor. A decade earlier, Jason had been an honors student at one of the top universities on the East Coast, majoring in international relations and linguistics. He had dreams of becoming a cultural attaché or a corporate liaison in global markets. He even spent a full year in Beijing through a study abroad program, learning Mandarin until he could speak it as fluidly as a native, but life had other plans. His wife, Caroline, had gotten sick not long after Emma was born, and within a year, Jason had dropped out to care for her full time. When she passed, he was left with mounting debt, a toddler, no degree to show for his brilliance. That was how he ended up scrubbing toilets instead of boardroom tables. And yet, Jason never complained, not once, because Emma smiled at him every morning. That was enough. On a quiet Wednesday night, just past midnight, Jason was cleaning the 27th floor, the executive level. It was rare to see anyone around at this hour. Usually, the place was a ghost town after 10 p.m., but tonight was different. As he passed the frosted glass conference room labeled Boardroom A, he heard voices. Raised, frantic voices. He paused mid-sweep. The tone wasn't just busy. It was panic. He edged closer, the mop handle still in his grip. Through the glass, he could make out several figures pacing. One woman, tall and sharply dressed in a tailored white pantsuit, was shouting into her phone. Jason recognized her instantly from the framed lobby portraits and Forbes covers. Vanessa Lang, Apex Corp's CEO. She was one of the youngest self-made billionaires in the country. A tech prodigy turned global strategist. The media called her the Frost Queen, known for her poise under pressure. But tonight, she looked rattled. "I don't care what the translator said." She barked into the phone. "Tell him the deal is not off. We'll send a new term sheet." "What do you mean he's refusing to pick up?" Jason's brows drew together. Mandarin. The words the other party had said, he could make out some of it. Misunderstanding, disrespect, cultural insult. The translator must have botched the tone. That happened more often than people thought. Mandarin wasn't just about vocabulary. It was about honor, nuance, idiom. Lose that, and you lose the deal. Jason stood there, gripping his mop tightly, something stirring in his chest he hadn't felt in years. An itch. A reflex. Moment in chess when you see the move before anyone else does. He could help. He knew he could. But he was a janitor, in a faded uniform and rubber gloves. What would they say? Another voice inside him whispered. What would Emma say if you stayed silent? He let go of the mop, squared his shoulders, and gently knocked on the glass door. Inside, Vanessa turned sharply. We're in a private. She started, then paused when she saw the blue uniform. I'm sorry, Jason said, voice calm, respectful. But I overheard something about your translator. I speak Mandarin. Fluent. Maybe I can help. The room fell dead silent. One of the suited men snorted. You're the janitor. Jason didn't flinch. Yes, sir. But I studied Mandarin for 4 years. Lived in Beijing for 1. I believe there's been a tone misinterpretation with the other party. If you'd allow me, be able to clarify. Vanessa stared at him, jaw slightly slack, caught between disbelief and curiosity. She glanced at the speakerphone, where the Chinese executive, Mr. Gao, was still on hold, waiting, growing impatient. Then back at Jason, she said, You better be good. Jason stepped forward. His heart was thudding, but his mind was calm. The moment he heard Mr. Zhao's voice again, he switched languages smoothly. Gao ziwangi hnb okin durao nun. Mu shi Jason. Njima yinisen. Shi siazes yintenza dikshuluchenya yaseras liuchima yibes. So President Gao, my deepest apologies for the disruption. Name is Jason. I believe there was some misunderstanding in today's communication. The line went quiet for a beat. Then a response. Iga she. T-men de J Ungil. So you're their manager. Jason chuckled softly, still in Mandarin. Jiet shasheli juji ga ni hejiwo. Din arila oji nendigiel. Araguran ya mendibida ahoyu shete jafangien. So not quite, just an observer. But I understand your concerns. Your honor and our compensation can both find a suitable resolution. What followed was a 10-minute exchange filled with metaphor, subtlety, cultural cues. Jason navigated them all flawlessly, switching between regional idioms and business etiquette. He cracked a joke that referenced a Chinese proverb. Gao laughed. Vanessa's jaw visibly dropped. By the end of the call, Zhao agreed not only to resume the deal, but to reopen negotiations under even better terms, citing Jason's respectful and educated tone. When the call ended, the room was still. Vanessa finally broke the silence. Who the hell are you? Jason shrugged. Just a janitor who listens. And with that, he turned and left the room. He didn't sleep much that night. Not because of nerves, but because Emma had a school field trip the next morning, and she needed her lunch packed and permission slip signed. Life didn't pause just because he'd saved $1 billion deal. At dawn, he walked her to the bus stop like always, the morning breeze cold against his janitor's jacket. Emma looked up at him, puzzled. Papa. He didn't answer. He just kissed her forehead and said, Because today I think I mattered. The next evening, Jason arrived at Apex Corp expecting the same routine. But the receptionist blinked when she saw him. Mr. Reed, Ms. Lang wants to see you. Right away. He walked into Vanessa's office with a cleaner's humility, but a diplomat's posture. She was waiting behind her glass desk, the skyline blazing orange behind her. She gestured to the chair. Set. He did. I read your file, she said almost accusingly. No mention of your language skills. No degree? Just community college credits and a 2-year break that goes unexplained. I dropped out to take care of my wife, Jason replied evenly. She had late-stage lymphoma. We couldn't afford in-home care. Vanessa sat back. Something flickered in her eyes. Pity, no. Respect? Janitorial work. It's stable. No one asks questions. I can leave at sunrise to be home when my daughter wakes up. She studied him a moment longer. You saved a multi-million-dollar deal last night. You know that, right? Jason nodded once. I guessed. She smiled, but genuine. We're building a new international strategy team. I want you on it. Jason blinked. You speak Mandarin better than any consultant I've met. You understand cross-cultural nuance. You read between the lines. She leaned forward. More importantly, you're the only person in this building who didn't try to impress me. You spoke to Zhao like a man, not a transaction. Jason hesitated. I have responsibilities. My daughter will accommodate. Salary, benefits, school funding. You'll never scrub another floor again. He looked at her, the weight of years pressing behind his eyes. Never minded scrubbing floors, Vanessa nodded. That's why I'm asking you. And so, Jason's world began to shift. The janitor with the mop was now the man who spoke languages few could master, who carried wisdom few expected, and who reminded a CEO that sometimes the greatest assets don't wear suits, they wear humility. That night, when he tucked Emma into bed, she asked, "Did you ever want to be something else?" Jason smiled, brushing her hair from her forehead. I think I just became it. Jason Reed hadn't worn a suit in years. Not since his wedding, to be precise. But now, staring at the navy blue tailored jacket hanging on the door of his new office at Apex Corp, felt like a symbol of some strange dream, one he hadn't dared believe could be real. Less than a week ago, he'd been pushing a mop across these same corridors, barely noticed by the people who now nodded respectfully as they passed him in meetings. He had a keycard, a nameplate on the door, and a formal title, Cultural Liaison and International Affairs Coordinator. A mouthful, but to Jason it translated to one thing: a chance. Vanessa Lang hadn't offered him a favor. She offered him a test, and Jason knew it. There were no shortcuts in Apex Corp. Everyone earned their place. His title might have changed, but the expectations were mountain high. Apex Corp was moving fast to expand its reach into Southeast Asia, and Vanessa had tasked him with bridging the gap between their American product teams and their Chinese investors, manufacturing partners, market research divisions. It was a steep learning curve, but Jason had learned to climb years ago, when grief, debt, and diapers had come crashing down at once. His first week in the new role was a whirlwind. He studied company reports during lunch breaks, listened to economic podcasts on the subway, and translated documents at night while Emma slept. He worked out of a corner office next to the global strategy team, his glass walls a constant reminder that nothing here was ever private. He was determined to prove he belonged. Not for the applause, not for Vanessa, for Emma Mexter. A knock on the open door broke his concentration one morning. He looked up to see a slender woman with short black hair and a sharp green dress. She extended a hand. I'm Lily Chen, Director of East Asia Partnerships. Heard about what you did last week. Quite the buzz. Jason shook her hand, offering a modest smile. Just trying to help. Well, help again. She handed him a thick folder. We're flying to Beijing in 3 days. Apex Corp is finalizing its partnership with Jinhe Technologies. Vanessa wants you on the trip. She says the deal only happens if you're in the room. Jason blinked. Beijing. You'll need to be more assertive than that. Lily said, half smiling. CEOs don't wait for maybes. Pack a suit. You're representing Apex now. As she left, Jason sat back in his chair, heart pounding. Beijing. He hadn't been back since he was 22. He'd studied in Hutong alleys, eaten street noodles with classmates, and walked the Great Wall hand in hand with Caroline before she got sick. He hadn't just learned Mandarin there. He'd left a piece of himself behind. He didn't hesitate. He called Emma's school, made arrangements with Mrs. Benson next door to watch her, and kissed her on the forehead that night as she slept. Papa's going to China, he whispered. For us. The plane to Beijing was sleek and cold, a symbol of corporate luxury. Jason still felt out of place inside. Vanessa sat 2 rows ahead, flanked by her legal advisor and head of international trade. Jason was given his own window seat, complete with a folder full of reports and a cup of jasmine tea. For the first few hours, he read in silence, absorbing every detail about Genhe technologies, the cultural intricacies of Chinese boardrooms, and Apex Corp's goals for expansion. When he finally closed the folder and leaned back, he heard Vanessa's voice. "You really don't sleep." He looked up to see her in the aisle, holding a second cup of tea. Jason smiled faintly. Didn't have the luxury for a while. She passed him the cup, then sat across the aisle, one leg crossed. "I did some digging. You were top of your class. Your professors said you were bound for a diplomatic career." He nodded once. "Happened. I also found an old paper you wrote, The Role of Language in Negotiating Power in Chinese Culture. You used a Tang Dynasty poem to explain business humility." Jason chuckled. "I was trying too hard to impress my professor." "Well, now you're trying to impress a room full of billionaires. So dig deep, Mr. Their eyes locked briefly. There was something different about Vanessa when she wasn't behind a boardroom table. Softer, but still sharp. She wasn't the ice queen the media portrayed. Just a woman with a kingdom to defend, and no time for pretenders. "I want you at my right hand during the meeting," she said. "Zhao respects you. The others will too. But this time, translate. Advise me. I need a mirror, not a parrot." Jason nodded. "You'll get both, if needed." She smiled and rose. "Good. Because if this deal goes south, we both go with it." The next morning, Beijing welcomed them with cool spring air and the dull hum of traffic. Jason inhaled deeply as he stepped off the plane, the scents and sounds flooding him with memories. The hotel was a towering architectural marvel, all steel, glass, and garden courtyards. The Genhe Technologies headquarters was even more impressive. A fusion of traditional Chinese aesthetics with modern design. Wooden panels sat beside AI-powered elevators. Dragons danced across the atrium wall, automated by light sensors. Jason had no time to absorb the beauty. He was whisked into a meeting room filled with executives, assistants, and legal counsel. Vanessa sat at the head of the table. Jason sat beside her. The room quieted as Mr. Gao entered, flanked by his vice presidents. He was older than Jason remembered, his hair thinner but his eyes just as sharp. They locked eyes, and Gao gave a small nod of recognition. "Mr. Reed," he said in Mandarin. Back from the shadows, Jason inclined his head with a respectful smile. "Honored to be welcomed again, Zhao Ziwanji." The negotiations began. Numbers, projections, export agreements. But the tension in the room wasn't about money. It was about trust. The last deal had nearly fallen apart due to an unintentional insult by one of Apex Corp's former consultants, who misused a Mandarin phrase that implied deception. Jason worked carefully now, translating Vanessa's statements not just with linguistic accuracy, but with tone, posture, and subtle metaphor. When Vanessa said, "We're offering a 12% equity share," Jason translated it as, "We are offering you a stake in our family's future, one we hope you will grow with us." When Gao asked, "What guarantee do we have that Apex respects our customs?" Jason replied, "Vanessa Lang doesn't just learn your rules, she plays by them." Zhao was pleased. The atmosphere warmed. Tea was poured. Lunch was served. And Jason, to Vanessa's surprise, carried the conversation forward, even steering it with carefully chosen idioms that earned laughter and nods from the Genhe team. After the meeting, Vanessa pulled him aside. "You're not just fluent. You're fluent in them. You made them feel heard." Jason exhaled. That's all most people want. They toured a few Genhe factories the next day. Jason found himself walking with Zhao between assembly lines. The older man asked, "Why are you working for Apex? You're not like the others." Jason considered his answer. "Because I have a daughter, and she deserves to see me do something I believe in. Zhao nodded slowly. Then you'll do well in business. Those who fight for others never lose. The deal was signed that evening. A historic partnership, one that would launch Apex Corp into the Chinese consumer market and give Jinhe access to Apex's AI chipsets. $1 billion handshake, with Jason as the quiet catalyst behind it all. The next morning, as they boarded their return flight, surprised Jason by sitting next to him this time. You could lead your own team, she said casually. I'd back it. Title. Jason shook his head. One thing at a time. Still have to figure out which tie matches my only pair of slacks. She laughed. A real, unguarded laugh that made Jason glance over. You're not like the others, she said. You listen. You don't posture. You make people feel seen. Jason didn't respond right away. Then he asked softly, And who sees you? She looked out the window at the clouds. No one, she said. But that's the job. Jason turned to her fully. Maybe it doesn't have to be. She looked at him then, really looked, and for a moment, neither of them were CEO or consultant. Just two people on a plane, both carrying the weight of people they loved, both trying to do right by those they cared for. They landed back in New York. Reporters were already buzzing about the Apex Jinhe deal. Headlines read, Surprise diplomatic move saves Apex expansion, and, Ooh, is the mystery man behind Apex's China deal. Vanessa made no public comment, but she quietly ensured Jason's name was credited in every internal announcement. A week later, a new plaque appeared on his office door. Jason Reed, Director of Cross-Cultural Strategy. When he picked up Emma from school that afternoon, she ran to him with a drawing. It showed him in a cape, standing next to a skyscraper with Chinese characters drawn in crayon. She beamed. We had to draw a superhero. Jason knelt, hugging her tightly. That's funny, he whispered. Because you're the reason I learned how to fly. Jason Reed never sought the spotlight, but now it followed him wherever he went. After the successful deal with Jinhe Technologies, Apex Corp hailed him internally as the linchpin that saved their international strategy. Executives who once passed him without a glance now greeted him by name, and interns whispered stories about the janitor who spoke like a diplomat. Despite the recognition, Jason tried to stay grounded. He still rode the subway with Emma in the mornings and made her school lunches with hand-written notes inside. For him, life wasn't about business-class flights or office titles. It was about being the father Emma needed and the man he promised his late wife he'd always remain. Change doesn't knock politely, it barges in. Jason's new role came with bigger responsibilities, tighter deadlines, deeper entanglements. Vanessa Lang, now more than just a boss, trusted him with tasks no one else saw. She looped him into investor calls, asked his opinion on expansion into South Korea, and even brought him into private sessions with her closest advisors. Jason noticed quickly, she wasn't just brilliant. She was alone. Despite being surrounded by thousands of employees and advisors, she carried the burden of leadership in silence. She never spoke about family. She rarely smiled except behind closed doors. And when the meetings ended, she returned to her penthouse office like a queen without a court. One Friday evening, long after the other executives had left, Jason lingered in the main conference room, reviewing notes from a sensitive presentation they were preparing for Apex Corp's new headquarters in Shanghai. Vanessa entered quietly, wearing jeans and a blazer instead of her usual high-fashion business attire. It surprised him. He almost didn't recognize her. You work too late? She said, placing a steaming cup of tea beside him. Jason glanced up, smiling faintly. Takes one to know one. She sat across from him, her heels kicked off, curling one leg under her. My mother used to say, "The tallest tree catches the most wind." I never understood that until I ran a company. Jason nodded thoughtfully. You catch a lot of wind. Storms, mostly. She replied with a soft laugh. Everyone thinks being at the top means you're powerful. But really, it means there's no one to lean on. Jason watched her for a moment. That's not entirely true. I've got employees, she corrected. Investors, analysts. None of them care if I sleep or if I'm scared, if I question myself every night. There was a pause between them. Jason closed his laptop. You're not alone, he said gently. You've just been too busy carrying everyone to notice who's walking beside you. Their eyes locked. Something in her softened, something she rarely showed in public. She looked down and sipped her tea. You always talk like that. A character in a novel. Jason chuckled. Only when I think the person I'm talking to needs to hear it. She shook her head. You really are something else, Reed. Later that night, Jason returned home to Emma already asleep. He kissed her forehead, then stared at the ceiling long after the lights were off. He hadn't meant to grow close to Vanessa. He hadn't meant to feel anything beyond respect and loyalty. But there was something in her. Something fragile, hidden beneath iron will and sharp intellect, that reminded him of himself, of Caroline, of grief wrapped in strength. The weekend brought little rest. Vanessa had asked Jason to lead a cultural workshop for their product team. A group of high-performing developers who had never set foot outside the U.S. The company's newest app, designed for the Asian market, had been delayed due to poor regional reception. Jason knew why. The branding was tone-deaf, and the marketing team hadn't consulted anyone who truly understood the culture they were targeting. On Monday, Jason stood in front of a crowd of coders and designers in Apex's Innovation Hub, a large open floor space filled with glass panels, smartboards, and neon lighting. He began calmly. You're all brilliant. But you're building something for people you've never met, in a language you don't understand. That's like trying to cook a dish with your eyes closed and no recipe. Some chuckled nervously. Jason continued. In Chinese culture, colors mean more than aesthetics. Red is prosperity. White is mourning. Your app's color palette, mostly white. A few heads bowed in embarrassment. And the name, Swift Exchange. That's great in English. In Mandarin, it roughly translates to hasty replacement, which implies unreliability. One designer raised a hand. So what do we do? Jason smiled. We listen. We learn. We build with them, not just for them. That day marked a turning point. Teams began reaching out to Jason before launching campaigns. He became more than a translator. He became a bridge. And yet, even as his influence grew within Apex Corp, he remained the same outside of it. He walked Emma to school every morning, took her to the park on Saturdays, and read her bedtime stories even when he was bone-tired. One evening, Emma asked him something that lingered in his mind. Papa, do you think Mama would be proud of you? Jason felt his throat tighten. He kissed her forehead and whispered, I hope so. As spring turned to summer, Vanessa's demands of Jason became more frequent, but more personal too. She invited him to private lunches, called him late at night for thoughts on speeches, and asked him to accompany her to investor retreats. One such weekend, she asked him to fly with her to Boston for a discreet summit between global tech CEOs. Jason hesitated, sure of leaving Emma for more than a night, but Mrs. Benson, ever supportive, promised to watch over her like her own. The retreat was held at a restored coastal estate overlooking the Atlantic, glass balconies, oak floors, and linen-draped tables. Jason, still adjusting to his new lifestyle, found the place surreal. He walked beside Vanessa, along the cliffs the evening they arrived. Ocean breeze tangling her hair. "Sometimes I hate all of this," she confessed. "The show. The image. Everyone here pretends to be gods, but they're terrified children in expensive clothes." Jason looked out at the crashing waves. "Then why stay?" She was silent for a long time. "Because if I don't, someone worse will take my place. Trying to do this the right way. But it's lonely." Jason turned to her. "You're not alone."
You've got me.
She looked at him, then eyes wide. "Do I?" Jason hesitated. "I'm here, Vanessa. I'm not going anywhere, lest you ask me to." A gust of wind blew between them, but neither moved. Slowly, tentatively, she stepped closer. "Not yet." But in the silence, something changed. An invisible line had shifted. They weren't just CEO and consultant anymore. They were something else. Something undefined but undeniable. When they returned to New York, didn't slow down. Apex Corp's Shanghai launch was approaching fast, and Vanessa tasked Jason with finalizing the regional teams, overseeing translation, and even advising the legal counsel on cultural clauses in their contracts. It was work he loved, complex, meaningful. But with rising attention came internal tension. One morning, Jason was called into a meeting with Apex Corp's Chief Operating Officer, tall and a slick, calculating executive with perfect suits and colder eyes. "I'll be blunt," Marcus said, folding his hands. "You're not one of us." Jason raised a brow. "Excuse me." "You were a janitor, Jason. I've worked with Vanessa for 10 years. She's never leaned on anyone the way she leans on you. Some of the board members are uneasy." Jason sat calmly. "Is that jealousy, Marcus, or genuine concern?" Marcus's lips thinned. "We're a publicly traded company. Personal entanglements can complicate perception." Jason stood. "If your concern is with my work, speak plainly. If it's with my background, then maybe Apex Corp isn't as forward thinking as I thought." He left the room without another word. That evening, Jason found Vanessa on the rooftop balcony outside her office, staring at the city lights. He told her what Marcus said. "Sorry," she said quietly. "He doesn't speak for me." "I know," Jason replied. "But he speaks for the world we're in." She turned to him, searching his eyes. "Do you want to leave?" He shook his head. "Want to build something that lasts. But not at the cost of who I am by." Vanessa took a step closer. "Then stay. With me. Not just in the office,
But beyond it.
Jason's breath caught. "Are you sure?" She reached for his hand. Never been more sure of anything. And then, there, on the rooftop where she once stood alone, they kissed. Softly, slowly, question being answered at last. The next morning, Jason took Emma to school as usual. She looked up at him, eyes bright. "Papa." "I am," he said. She tilted her head. "Did you win something?" He laughed. "Something like that." What he didn't tell her was this: he had won something far rarer than money or prestige. He had won respect. A place at the table. A voice in rooms that once ignored him. And, perhaps, the heart of a woman who had built walls so high no one dared climb them, until now. The buzz surrounding Jason Reed's rise had grown beyond the walls of Apex Corp. It was no longer just a heartwarming anecdote, whispered around water coolers. It was national news. The press caught wind of the once overlooked janitor, turned international strategist. They devoured the story with the fervor of a hungry world, craving authenticity. Headlines blared, from mop to market genius. Meet the single dad behind Apex Corp's global win. Online forums exploded with praise. He was called the People's Executive, a symbol of hidden potential, the man who proved the meritocracy still had a pulse. But to Jason, it all felt surreal, both flattering and disorienting. The world had discovered him. But he was still the same man who packed peanut butter sandwiches for his daughter, who read old books under streetlights when he couldn't afford electricity, who once cried himself to sleep holding a hospital bill in one hand and a baby bottle in the other. He tried to shield Emma from the storm. She didn't fully understand why people asked for his autograph, or why her teacher looked teary-eyed when Jason came to pick her up. All she cared about was that he got to walk her to school in the mornings and help with her science project on volcanoes. Still, Jason knew the world's attention wouldn't last forever. And deep inside, he wasn't sure he wanted it to. He wanted a life of meaning, noise. Vanessa Lang, for her part, had been surprisingly open in the weeks following their rooftop confession. Their relationship was still quiet, discreet, kept behind closed doors and trusted boardrooms. But it was real. Vanessa was different around him, more human, more vulnerable. She still maintained her fierce command in public, but in the quiet spaces, she would curl up beside him, share childhood memories, or whisper fears she'd never spoken aloud. She once told him that success had always been a wall for her, one she'd built to hide behind, not climb over. With him, the wall cracked. Still, not everyone celebrated their connection. The board's whispers had grown louder. Jason noticed it in the way conversations stopped when he walked into rooms. He caught glances during quarterly meetings, the kind that spoke volumes in corporate silence. Vanessa noticed too, but she refused to be deterred. She made one thing clear. Jason had earned his place, and she wouldn't let anyone question it. But one day, the pushback arrived not in whispers, but in writing. Jason was summoned to a board committee meeting under the guise of reviewing international policy. When he entered, the room was unusually formal. Marcus Tollode sat with his arms crossed, flanked by 2 HR executives and a legal advisor. Jason's instincts immediately went on alert. "We've reviewed your recent involvement in key decision-making processes," Marcus began, his voice polished but sharp. "And while your contributions have been significant, there are concerns regarding your dual role, both as an employee and as someone in a personal relationship with the CEO." The Jason didn't flinch. "What exactly are you accusing me of?" "Nothing, officially," Marcus said, his smile tight. "But the optics are problematic. Some shareholders are uncomfortable. The press is romanticizing your story, which diverts from Apex's core image. There's talk of favoritism." Jason felt his pulse tighten. "I earned every position I've held here, from janitor to liaison to strategist. I saved $1 billion deal with Jinhee. I've been on every international call, every cultural contract. You're telling me that's favoritism?" "No," Marcus said flatly. "We're telling you this is business. And sometimes, business needs separation from sentiment." Jason stood slowly. "Are you asking me to step down?" "We're offering a reassignment," Marcus said, "to a less visible division. Same pay, less press, more structure." Jason looked around the room. Not one of them met his eyes. Cowards in suits. He leaned forward. "Tell Vanessa you want me gone. I dare you." Marcus's smirk vanished. Jason turned and walked out. That evening, Vanessa found him in his office, still in his dress shirt, his hands folded on the desk. She could tell something had shifted. "They tried to bury me," he said quietly. "I know," she replied. "You knew they would." She came closer. "I hoped they wouldn't." Jason stood and walked toward the window. The skyline stretched before him, glinting like steel promises. "This isn't just about us," he said. "It's about what I represent." A janitor walking into the boardroom scares people who've never lifted anything heavier than a report. "They can't touch you," Vanessa said, her voice firm. "They already are." She came beside him. Then we'll fight. Together. He turned to her. Or we walk away. Or she froze. What? You don't need me here, Vanessa. I've done what I came to do. Proved something to Emma. To myself. And maybe even to you. But I'm not going to live as your shadow just to keep a title. Love. That's survival. Her eyes welled. I don't want to lose you. Then don't. He took her hands. But let's build something on our own terms. And just like that, the decision was made. Not out of anger, but clarity. Jason typed his resignation that night. Not because he was broken, but because he had finally found his power. He thanked Apex Corp in his letter. Thanked them for giving a single father a chance. For reminding the world that brilliance isn't always born in boardrooms. Sometimes it scrubs the floors. When the resignation became public, the media went wild again. Some called it a loss for Apex. Others speculated about his next move. But Jason didn't answer. He packed his office with quiet dignity, then picked up Emma from school with a smile on his face and a promise in his heart. Starting something new, he told her. She beamed. Will I be part of it? The biggest part. 2 months later, Jason launched his own consulting firm, Reedbridge Global, focused entirely on cultural strategy and international human-centered negotiations. His first clients were smaller startups struggling to enter Asian markets. Then mid-level firms. Then government offices. Word spread fast, not because of his story, but because of his results. He trained executives to speak with people, not at them. He taught them that language was more than words. It was empathy, posture, history. Vanessa stayed by his side. Stepping down from day-to-day operations at Apex Corp, she became an advisory partner at Reedbridge. Not for control, but for belief. They built something together. Something real. Something no one else could replicate, because it was born from love, from struggle, from truth. Their first international seminar was held in Shanghai, in the very same conference room where Jason had once stood in a janitor's uniform. This time, he wore a tailored gray suit and walked in with Vanessa on one side and Emma on the other, holding both their hands. When he stood before the audience filled with diplomats, entrepreneurs, and eager listeners, he smiled and began not in English. Fluent Mandarin. 10年前，我在这座城市只是一名清洁工。今天我是一个父亲，一个企业家，一个桥梁。谢谢你们看到我。10 years ago, I was just a janitor in this city. Today, I am a father, an entrepreneur. Thank you for seeing me. The room erupted in applause. But Jason didn't need the clapping. He only needed to look at the two people smiling back at him.